I always find it difficult to talk into a camera because I'm not a broadcaster by any stretch of the imagination. So as they try to point me to the right camera, they don't stress if you're on the other side. I'm gonna get it right by the end of this chat. So today I welcome you to the first ULP leadership conversation. You know, it was very difficult for us to come up with a topic, but we also didn't want to be very presumptuous, so we didn't want to say the three wise men. And when we started advertising this event, the wise became a topic for the day, that we should have used it or shouldn't have used it. So for those who are watching, you will then, by the end of this event, define that, are they wise or not? And no pressure on you, says. But all I'm here to do is to welcome you and to also welcome our facilitator today. We're a special friend of the family and myself who's coming here to be the facilitator and program director for us tonight. I have to say that I went to a multiracial school, so when I married my wife who was good at English, so that she could read for me. I don't have to read. Because in high school, every time there was unprepared reading, I just seemed to be sick. And I didn't do that. So as I read today, forgive me for the parts that you feel I'm not doing so well on, okay? Just understand that. But today I want to introduce Bra Milton Nkosi. I'll keep calling him Bra Milton, and you'll understand why at the end. But Bra Milton Nkosi was with the British Broadcasting Corporation Africa Bureau analyst and correspondent until January 2020, when he retired after 30 years of service at the BBC. Bra Milton is now the chairman of MMN International Consulting, which specializes in reputation, advisory, and media management. Bra Milton spent 4 years as South Asia Bureau editor based in New Delhi in India. He was in charge of the BBC News Bureau in the region's countries such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and of course, India. Before then, Bra Milton was head of Africa as bureau chief in Johannesburg, a role that he held and served in for 7 years. He joined the BBC in the 80s, just before Nelson Mandela was released from prison. He covered all the township wars at the time and subsequently the political negotiations that followed. Bra Milton did his journalism training at the BBC Academy's College of Journalism in London, his management and leadership program from Ashridge College in Hertfordshire. He studied teaching and civil engineering, which is good, teaching. Over the years, Bra Milton has covered major stories in Angola, in Zaire, which present-day DRC, Sierra Leone, Libya, Rwanda, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Sudan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, and many other countries. And one day we're going to have a ULP where he'll just be telling us stories from covering the wars in the Middle East. He's also an excellent storyteller, if I say, according to me anyways. Bra Milton has been fortunate to interview many global leaders, and these include, but are not limited to, Walter Sisulu, Harry Belafonte. Some of you might not know who that is, but the people on the panel, I'm sure they definitely know. Former US President Bill Clinton, former UK Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, F.W. de Klerk, former Nigerian President Obasanjo, former UN Secretary General, amazing guy, Kofi Annan, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, former President Jacob Zuma, President Thabo Mbeki, and former Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe, including our current President Cyril Ramaphosa and the late Winnie Mandela, amongst many. Bra Milton moved to work in the UK and returned to South Africa before moving to New Delhi. He was instrumental in the publishing of the book Soweto Inside. He's a Soweto boy. The one day we was in Soweto and I saw him walking down the road. Like, you couldn't even tell it's Bra Milton. He has also written a chapter in the world-acclaimed book, Something to Write Home About. These two books are sold all over the world, and they've reached their award-winning books. Last week, funny enough, we launched our first ULP Authors Forum. So Babuchat Debe, there's a candidate for you. He remains active after his retirement. Bra Milton is a trustee on the board of Warwick University's Africa Project and is a lecturer at the Institute for Advancement of Journalism. Last year, Bra Milton joined some of his BE colleagues to go around the country, helping teach storytelling, investigative journalism, solution journalism, and deep listening at 4 universities. These include NWU in Mafikeng, UCT in Cape Town, Tekis in Pretoria, and UJ in Johannesburg. Dr. Mohale, apart from you with your association with UJ, the rest of the panelists must question themselves. Yeah. In December last year, he delivered a lecture at Namibia University of Science and Technology. In 2017, Bra Milton traveled to Dubai to interview Duduzane Zuma on allegations of state capture. This video has went viral all over social media and has over 1.2 million views on YouTube alone. You know, Bra Milton, if I'm going to write your obituary, this is the one thing I'm going to write. I think I'll conclude everything. That's the one thing you're known for, with all your acclaim, achievements, and everything you've done. Bra Milton is married to a neurologist, but the first part of it is pediatric neurologist, Dr. Dorcas Wilson. So I was fortunate to do a course with Bra Milton's wife, and because we've got professors here, let me tell you a little bit of a story. Every time a new professor comes into class, they want to get the feel of the class. So because we're not a major class, they would ask everyone, what's your name, your background, and what you do. And I know we had someone who had a PhD guy in the class, we had Wit in school, and we had quite a few people who had done very well. But every time it got to Dr. Dorcas, and she says, I'm a pediatric neurologist, I would stand up and whistle and go, because that title alone almost shuts all of us down. But she's a very lovely lady, and they were blessed with 2 kids, a 20-year-old Khosi Itzile, that's Kisetswana, and 18-year-old Kanyisile. Although Bra Milton is an award-winning journalist, he often reminds me and others that he just wants to be known as an ordinary township boy from Orlando West and in Soweto who supports and loves Orlando Pirates. So I don't think we could have found anyone better fitted to be the facilitator today. So without any further ado, Bra Milton, over to you, my brother.
Theo, that was way above my pay grade. Thank you so much for your kindness. Before we start, can we take off the mask? We are observing the current status of affairs with COVID here and the government mitigating regulatory framework. But for the viewers on the screen online, particularly the deaf viewers, it's good for lip reading. So we're taking off the mask for that. So please feel free to take off the mask. And there's enough social distancing. If you can see here, we are covered in that area. It's good to be back here. We love this place. Unleashing leadership potential. If you have time at home, in the next few weeks and months, follow the program here and come here. It will inspire you. The topic for tonight, as the CEO has quite rightly pointed out, there was a debate about the wise in the sentence, the three wise men from the East. Well, this is a very poignant moment for South Africa. Sitting before us here are three men who were born in the east of Johannesburg and grew up in Katlehong. And today, they are all three of them professors. And it is a very special moment, not just for Katlehong, for any person who grows up from any township, any village, and from any corner of this world, to see you sitting here, and wherever you are, in any township, look at these men here and know that anything on this planet is possible. And it's not where you come from, it's where you are going. This is what this is about. There's an old quote which I lived by for many years by the renowned author Oscar Wilde. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. This is what has happened here. So if you remember the story of the three wise men in the Bible, in the good book of Matthew, you know that there were three kings who visited Jesus and saved him from the clutches of the King Herod. We are not trying to say these men are equal to those ones. But as I was preparing for tonight, I saw that they bore gifts for Jesus. And tonight, also, these three gentlemen from the East have a gift for South Africa. They have one gift: education. And I thought that was a nice little twist in the tale there as I was preparing. Now, I will introduce the professors, but before I do that, it would be remiss of me, of course, not to congratulate Babu Morris Khatebe, who was confirmed yesterday as the adjunct professor at Wits Business School. Congratulations, Punga. So it's very special. And I will come to his background in a minute. Let me start with my good old friend, Bonang. This is an amazing human being, Professor Bonang Mohale. We've known each other for a few years now, and he knows that my wish is to reduce my size to his size. And I always admire his thought. And also there's a small connection. When he started in his career, when he went to university, he studied medicine. So we love that connection. And we've discussed it so many times. As we sit here, Professor Bonang Mohale is the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, for which we are incredibly proud. And he has an illustrious career, which I won't bore you with, because if I read you all his achievements, we will not be discussing anything else tonight, because he has achieved so much. He was former chairman of Shell, and he's been all over the world. He's studied so much. He is just an incredible human being. And of course, sitting to his left is the wonderful and known to be reserved Professor Zebulon Vilakazi, also from the East. So, ningambone thule nje. Imbazo. My grandfather would have said, "Ingqondo yakhe inkemba." In other words, as sharp as a blade. And Professor Vilakazi, when he was appointed, I remember one of the headlines in the Business Day said, this is the headline: Wits appoints Katlehong-born nuclear physicist, Zebulon Vilakazi, to lead institution. And I was thinking, what if he was born in Sentin? Would they say Wits appoints Sentin born? Be that as it may, Professor Vilakazi joined Wits in January 2014 as Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Postgraduate Affairs, and was promoted to the position of Vice Principal in April 2020. He has served as Group Executive for Research and Development at the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa and as Director of Itemba Labs. He's born in Katlehong, Eguruleni. Professor Vilakazi obtained his PhD from Wits in 1998. Where were you in 1998? Make this year your 1998. Start. He was one of the first students from Africa to conduct PhD research at the European Center for Nuclear Research in the CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. And he too has got so many achievements. I will just stop there, but we honor you and we appreciate you. And of course, I will not go too much into Professor Khatebe's own background, but safe to say, if you are joining us for the first time, he is the big cheese here. This is his idea to have Unleashing Leadership Potential, ULP. And he was chairman at Sasol. He's achieved so much. He's got an MBA, and he's got a beautiful family. And my favorite, more than the kids and Theo, is Mama Joyce Khatebe. She's the real boss. So thank you very much for hosting us. But can I start now? Let's have a conversation. Can I start perhaps by asking you, Professor Khatebe, what is it about your background, where you grew up in Katlehong, that has carved your way to where you are now? So if you look back from the nucleus where you started, what was the sort of, what were the, not the influencer as in Instagram, but what were the influencing factors for you?
Thank you very much, Milton, for this opportunity of sharing together with these extremely wise people, wise men from the East. We're all from Katlehong. There's something about Katlehong. Katlehong means, my suit is right, place of success. And that's why I was so proud that we gather here. There's something about Katlehong which is inspiring. I grew up in Skosana, and I was born in 23, Skosana section. First, I think the person who had a huge impact in my life in 23, obviously my mom and dad, but my grandmother, you know, grandmothers have got that kind of a touch, Umadlamini. And then as I grew up and I went to school, as soon as I could count at the age of 7, my grandfather, who was a businessman who started a small shop in Katlehong, got me to come and work as a shop assistant. These days it would be called child labor, but it was such a valuable experience to be inspired by him, mentored by him. His name is Philemon Khatebe. Every time I speak about leadership, everything that I know about leadership, it was from him. And so I think just growing in that robust, very difficult circumstances, but having a family that is extremely supportive and encouraging, and also giving opportunity to learn business at a very early age is what really inspired me.
Thank you very much. And what about Professor Mohale?
So first, let me pay my respect to Ubabumbulis Khatebe. uBhungane, umthimkhulu kaBhungane, inkalankala yasemlanjeni, umakhulukhulu. Khubuya hai tshikele fatshe jwe ke marwana, ya kgelwa metsing jwe ke magala. For being an adjunct professor, it's been long in coming. I'm glad that yesterday they confirmed what all of us already know, have felt and experienced. Katlehong, a place of success, because we are forcibly removed from KwaDugatole.
Yeah.
This was the 7th land expropriation without compensation by the National Party government. We know of Kofifi, of District 6, of Sophia Town. The old government had 10 land expropriations without compensation. When our government wants to talk about it today, they say, no, you'll scare the investors because you have to change the constitution. We have changed the constitution many times, even by this ANC-led government. The first was the floor crossing constitution here, and we did, which allowed the ANC to rule for the first time in the Western Cape, because the math would never allow the ANC to rule there unless they change that math, because white people are less than 10%, 8.3% in the rest of the country, but 22% in the Western Cape. Africans are 90% everywhere else, in fact, black people in general, 79% Africans. But in the Western Cape, they're only 38%. So when you look at the so-called colors and white people, 62%. People who have been taught to aspire to be white. So it's not going to be easy. So we enjoyed being in Katlehong because all of us shared that in common. We were dumped here. And you know, the National Party was very good. They would never just dump you by accident. They would do geological studies to make sure that where they dump you, it must be barren. It must be arid. There must be no mineral resources, because they learned northwest with the Bafokeng tribe that they sat on the richest deposits of platinum. They didn't want to make that mistake. So we were part of those people that were forced in 13% of the land. But we didn't know that we were poor, because all the houses looked the same, 4-roomed houses. The richest amongst us would have big windows, they would have stoops, and their gate would close on its own. Not because they had electricity or motors, but because they put a spring that you push it, it would yank it back. That's me.
That's your upbringing. Yeah. It's that spring. And Professor Vilakazi, I know we must, even before we carry on, just a disclaimer. Vilakazi Street is not about you in person.
Milton, where do I start?
Yeah.
You know, how can you top that?
Yeah.
First, also like to congratulate Bramoris. I had nothing to do with it at all. Nor did I have anything to do with your appointment. All I just did was to tell the Chancellor, Dr. Judith Lamini, and the Chair of the Council, Mr. Isaac Shongwa, that, you know, we happen to have gone to the same high school, Foxes, which is called Fumana High School, but he was a few years ahead of me. He might look younger than I am, because of the fees must fall in pressure. He's aged me a little bit, but I thought corporate was making you older, but it seems like higher education is much tougher than corporate world. But I think that it's actually such an honor to be among these distinguished gentlemen who happen to be from Katlehong. By the way, you know, in tough times, you made reference to the book of Matthew under the rule of Herod and the occupation by Tiberius, the then emperor of Rome. It was very tough, right? 3 men came from the east. So clearly the sun rises from the east, not from the west, to use our terms. But so I mean, I think we share a similar experience. Of course, they are a little older than I am, and they were pioneers. I mean, I can talk to Bramoris, who was actually just a few blocks away from me. I'm from 505 Skosana section, next to the main hospital, which is the intersection point for all people from, you know, sections of Katlehong to where we were. I think also, you know, it's a strength of the family. I'm privileged, despite not having had all the material advantages, to have grown, to have been lucky. I really have had a guiding star of luck, more than anything else, not one's great talents. A very strong family, 2 great parents, 2 wonderful people who have departed many years ago. Great army of siblings, and those siblings don't include my parents, you know, what they would call 8 children that they had. You know, we had like in a 4-roomed house, which went to become an 8-roomed house. Almost at some stage, extended kids. I don't know how you managed to fit into that, you know. And also, uncles who would come, and the people who influenced me the most were my siblings. We were a family that actually liked ideas, debate. I had friends also who came from such families as well. So actually, one is a village child. And I had an uncle who actually played a key role in the world of ideas, music, sport, and basically love of knowledge. I think that to me is what shaped me. Just love and discipline and a bit of hard, tough love as well.
Brilliant. Can I say Bonang, Professor Mohale?
Yeah, please just dispense with titles.
Yes.
Yeah, let's let it flow.
Thank you very much. You heard it, it's on the record. Bonang, you came from Chapo section, so you are not part of the inner circle here of Skosan. We want you to share with us what your experience in leadership has taught you about where our country finds itself now and where we think it ought to be and where it should be going.
So first, the exciting milestones of the 21st century will not be because of technology, but because of this expanding concept of what it means to be truly human. Especially now that the whole world is under lockdown. And none of us were there during February of 1918 that lasted up until the April of 1920, the Spanish flu, which didn't originate in Spain. That lasted 2 years, came in 4 consecutive waves, affected 500 million people. At that time, that was 38% of the global population, killed more than 20 million people, more than the First World War did, because the World War killed 17 million people. And next month will be locked down for a year. So 332 days, and yet we are social animals in bone and marrow. How do you engage, interact, and interface? Because we yearn hugging people. We are tactile human beings. We kiss. And all we had to do was to wave through our windows. And I just touched his elbow. So leadership, it's about being shaped by the context, your own context, but also what you are called upon as the pain to solve. Because creativity is thinking new things, but innovation is doing new things. So leadership, more than anything else, it's about the doing, the execution. And our country is the one thing that they find they struggle a little bit. So how do you as a township thug, accepting that a child that is not embraced by the village will burn the village down in order to feel its warmth? That almost 12 months that we've been under lockdown, my grandmother used to say, when the fisherwomen and the fishermen can't go out to sea for whatever reason, they repair their nets. What are we doing to repair our own nets as human beings? Because if you are an executive like we are, of course you are concerned about delivering excellence and financial stability and this notion of final accountability. But in the pandemic, that can be the first thing that you discuss when you talk to your colleagues for the first time through Zoom, Skype, or even telephone. When you know that they are not in a good headspace. So HSSE assumes a new meaning where the well-being of your employees ought to be number one. Because health is not just the absence of disease and infirmity, but it's a state of physical, emotional, social and spiritual well-being. It's a state. How can we take our people into that state, especially mental health? So suicides have gone up, depression has gone up, admissions have gone up because we're not designed for this. Therefore, I think to answer your question, as a leader, your job is to say my number one biggest, most valuable asset is our people. Not the bricks and mortar, not the products and services that we provide, but their well-being, their mental health. Therefore, when I engage, interact, and interface with them is to say, are you okay? And pause to listen for an answer. Actively listen and hear, so that when somebody says, I'm struggling, my next question is, can I do something? How can I help you? Therefore, the narrative has to be that of care, of kindness, of humanity, of wanting to be deeply connected to other human beings. Thank you, my brother.
That's brilliant. I suppose these grandmothers, they cloned them. Because each time I listen to people, when they quote their grandmother, they're really talking about real stalwarts. But Maurice, what about you? What are your thoughts about where we need to be sort of channeling our energies, as Bonang has just said?
Well, Bonang has spoken in broad philosophical understanding of leadership. I just want to be very practical. Our country is going through major challenges, and leaders need to rise to that challenge. And one of the biggest challenges we're facing is corruption. And I'm very passionate about, one of the reasons I wanted to come to the business school is to really develop the next generation of leaders that are going to be ethical, authentic, and they'll be committed to make a difference in this world. And I always say when I speak to my mentees here at ULP, what you need to do is to make this world a little bit better than you found it. Not make it worse than you found it. And most of our leaders right now, and let's be honest, throughout the continent, is just they make this world a little bit worse than they found it. So what do we need to do? We need to basically make sure that we generate leaders and the next generation of leaders, especially coming from Katlehong. I want to speak to the Katlehong youngsters because I remember when I was in Katlehong, you know, my role model was the guy kwazana yakuka blind food scissors practice and I see into ana because I was ungakwazi njenge bazobathi ungakwazi njenge nzule uzamba fana umscratch I mean, look at that. That kind of role model was terrible, you know? And that's why we're taught just to be violent, taught to be unethical, taught to be thieves. I mean, a person you admire, out to be, it was, what yeah, I mean, that whole system, it created that. But obviously now the political system has nurtured it. And we have to, because what does corruption? It robs the poor. It exacerbates poverty. It exacerbates inequality. It exacerbates diseases. Our continent is facing measure. That's one. That's more passionate. But I mean, there's three trends that are happening in the world right now. This pandemic has shown us that the pre-COVID world is not going to come back. The world has changed. So we need to develop leaders that are nimble, agile, that's going to be able to make a huge impact. The second one, I mean, I'm an energy guy. This transition from high carbon economy to low carbon economy is a massive change. And we need to make sure we develop leaders that will take us into this new clean and green energy. And how do we do it without actually leaving too many people behind and causing more poverty? How do we do it when we leave our country, which is endowed with coal, for instance? Do we neutralize that? Should it be, we must have what we call climate justice, so we need leaders. And then obviously, finally, the digital transformation is massive. And last week here, when with Marwala, he was talking about digital illiteracy being now the biggest challenge that we're facing. You know, when we grew up, it was literacy. You know, when you could read and write, especially in the rural areas, the old people will call you, you know, and you would read. But now digital literacy is going to be the game changer, and it's going to decide who wins and who doesn't win. So we need leaders that are going to lead in that cutting edge. So that's what I'm saying as a responsibility for us as leaders.
Very much. When you're talking about digital literacy, you know, in my mind, the picture that comes up is those parliamentary meetings that we watch on the TV. And all you hear is, unmute yourself, honorable, unmute yourself. You realize this digital literacy is required there. Babu Vilagazi, what are your thoughts?
You know, Bramuris and Bonang, I mean, these two, I would call them scholar corporate leaders as well. You know, philosopher kings of corporate world have actually almost covered ground. But I just need to just add a little bit on what Morris said and just tell you at least the slight dimension I want to add is that you mentioned this digital leadership. No? You know, if you look at history, for example, the last 100 years, I mean, that's the year that we've basically ramped up in technology. There were powers, global powers, and I think that's on to check how does Africa fit within this whole global map. Of course, there was the rise of Germany with its strong science, and many of them went to America thanks to Hitler's very stupid views with regard to anti-Semitism. Lots of talent went to America, and guess who actually became the first nation to usher a new age? The nuclear age was America, right? And therefore, we had the two main political elites competing for global domination, driven by what we call two basically technologies that we grew up under, that shaped us. The nuclear age, that determined world power, and the rocket age, because therefore you can take that nuclear bomb and put it into a rocket, then you have basically the control of space. It shaped, America was shaken to the core, MIT, all these institutions were pushed to the limit, investments were made to leapfrog what basically was a third world country a few years, a century ago. America was a third world country of gunslingers into a global superpower. Don't forget European backwater, where basically they removed all the riffraff they didn't want and sent them to America. And that country rose in 1950 to become the world leading nation, right? That defined the 20th century, which of course America prevailed because the Soviet Union got bankrupt and collapsed. And now we are seeing a new battlefront that Morris alluded to. The new battlefront won't be about, the space race, Brezhnev and Gorbachev and so on and so forth. Brezhnev and Nixon, Gorbachev and Reagan, remember those things. No, it will be about the battle of the technosphere, the 5G, quantum computing. The economist every year tells you who is investing in quantum computing, in this tech. So therefore, the next frontier of battle is invisible to us. That's the next battle of technosphere, and it's playing out in diplomacy, in the Darachit that is showing between the outgoing president, who is gone now, and Xi Jinping. So it's becoming almost like digital diplomacy of actually who controls, as President Putin said, he or she, or rather quoted to have said, he who controls AR rules the world. And that's what the Marola alludes to, actually, my friend. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, to use the Latin word, quo vadis, Africa, siempre epi novi, something new out of Africa. And we are actually nothing but spectators. You've got the ringside seat. I mean, we've been spectators for the last 500 years of human growth. And that actually is what really cooks my noodle, keeps me awake at night, is where do we feature? So that is actually what, and finally, if you just indulge me a little bit, having said that, because I was just trying to extend from what Morris said in terms of response to COVID, you've mentioned corruption, you've mentioned other issues, but the key thing as well is kind of a Roosevelt moment, which I've been preaching about to my team. And I think maybe I'll talk about it in a second, but I maybe I should if I might, is that this is nothing new. This too shall pass. In 1933, Roosevelt took over America, height of Great Depression, 4 years into the deep depression. I mean, I'm not an economist here. I've been a sheltered academic all my life. 4 years into deep depression, Capone rules Chicago. John Dillinger, whose movies you saw in those Bioscope, I'm a brand, here is a man taking over a society in 1933, a democratic society, as it were at the time, because it discriminated against blacks in the South, in the world where democracy itself was falling apart. false prophets that promised to give you light and become these leaders, right? These proto-fascists that arose, nothing new there, became monsters of the 20th century. Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Imperial Japan, incredible war criminals that ruled that world and were central strongmen, shaky Britain. And here is a man who is taking presidency, 1933, when his body is failing him, riddled with polio, tells Americans and the world that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We must look to the better angels of us, right? And then someone asked him, some journalist from, I think, the New York Times, the New Yorker, or Washington Post, that Mr. President, looking at his, weak state of physical self, because the president must be robust, 6 feet tall, being an all-American leader like, John Wayne. And here's a frail man assuming this office. And said, why are you such an optimist, And he said, when you spend 2 years bedridden, and after 2 years you are able to wiggle your toe, you have every reason to be optimistic. So leadership is minted in the foundry of fire itself, not in good times. So we need to give people hope in a moment of fire, the furnace of fire. Diamonds are created under conditions in the alluvial plains of Earth of high temperature and pressure. Thank you.
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful, my goodness. Can I move you to where you are, so to speak? I'll start with you, Pramoris. You left the corporate world. I mean, you could be chairing more boards, making more money, spending it. I'm not sure if you'd be wearing gold chains, but maybe you'd be sitting in a jet and counting it like Floyd Mayweather. But no, you're not interested in that. You're going to education, academic. Why?
Very important question you ask, actually. Very great question. After 35 years of being in corporate and being a business leader, particularly in the oil industry, they used to call us oil magnates, and being blessed by the industry in material terms, you come to a question where you've got to ask yourself, how many chickens can you eat? And I mean, how many cars can you drive? How many beautiful houses can you have? If you continue down that route of chasing material stuff, you may miss your purpose in life. And so I've been very deliberate about purpose. And I thought, instead of me, as you say, now playing golf 3 times a day, I thought, man, this latter part of my life, I've got to give it meaning and purpose. And there's no higher purpose than to really, in my book, see talent, identify it, polish it, develop it, and let it fly. And that's what unleashing leadership potential is about, is I living it. And I just saw, we've been doing this for 10 years here, and when this opportunity came, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to do it now on a national scale and on an international scale. And because I know what it means when you come out of a business school. I came out of that business school, West Business School, 25 years ago. It just gives you confidence to take the world. And it gives you confidence to do things. And most of the achievements that I have been able to is because of that. So if I can give these young people that opportunity to fly and unleash their potential, but more importantly, make sure that they are value-based leadership and they can really go out there and become authentic leaders. And go on, the multiplier effect is even bigger because they can unleash the potential of other people and more people. And we can create a better society. So that attracted me. And it resonated with deep sense of purpose that is in me. And that's why I'm here.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Ntate Mohale, you are chairman of Bidvest, right? Yeah. You could also be... maybe not counting hard cash on a private jet like Mayweather, but you could be maybe on Instagram showing us your latest bling and so on, or enjoying it the way you want to enjoy it. But you also have gone into education, and now you're the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, all the way from Katlehong. This is a moment of pride for all Katlehongers and all Sowetans, all Guguletans, all Zwides, whichever township you want to think about, Guamashu, Mlazi, everywhere around the country. And to see you leave that material world, in essence, and going into the more academic world, what is that drive for you?
So a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And if that candle can light another, you can start a revolution. And in academia, that's what you can do, by touching and connecting with people at a really deep and profound level, because you have an opportunity to describe, to define, and shape. And it is the shaping that turns me on. So the 21st century will be remembered for many things, but for me, for three things. For putting men on the moon, giving us the internet, but also for letting 5 million people die of HIV/AIDS without lifting a finger. So all of us have the good side about us, but also the dark side. It's the choices we make. When Ubra Morris was speaking, I got goosebumps because it resonates. But this is the essence of who we are. So when you get into a graduation hall and you are from Eilaline in the village, that graduation hall is very hostile to you. You don't see yourself in this. You are lost. When you are a woman and you are black in South Africa, 27 years into democracy, you don't see the language that you grew up with. You don't see the symbols that are familiar to you and calm you down. You are on edge. You are a temporary sojourner. Therefore, we have an opportunity as African academics to lay the foundation one brick at a time to bring about this notion of an inclusive academic excellence. The emphasis is on inclusive, because the greatest injustice is exclusion. Black people are not lazy. Women are not afraid of the world of work. They've been both systematically, chronologically, and methodically excluded. 119 pieces of legislation that says you don't belong here. Therefore, we want to look our children in the eye and say to them collectively, individually and severally, we have ultimately succeeded in overcoming the legacy of apartheid, the legacy of exclusion. So we want to make sure that we bring about public ownership of universities. 26 public universities must be owned by Mema Dikgetsi, Lentate Mothapo, Khosi Itzile, and say, this is an extension of myself. At the moment, it's not. We want to bring about this notion of social justice, because a majority of our people today, a medical student says, I cannot be admitted on my final year because I don't have the 50% to pay as admission in an institution of higher learning. So when we became free on the 27th of April, 1994, people who went to university were 7%. We've just moved it up to 11%, making us part of an elite. But God be damned if we are going to be elitist in our approach and in our actions. We need to use this elitism to lift as you rise, so that we can include those that have been deliberately excluded. Lastly, we really want to give expression to this notion of academic freedom. You can't be learned when you are wedded to your ideas. It's about debating. It's about critical thought. It's about being curious. It's about helping us to think about the world not as it is, but as it could be. The art of the possible. Nkosi.
That sentence, the world as it is versus the world as it should be. So I've just been reading Barack Obama's The Promised Land. So what really got Michelle really going was that he invited her in Chicago in one of those, when he was still an organizer. And he was giving a speech there to a small group of people in a church on a Saturday afternoon. And the title of his speech was "The World as It Is and the World as It Should Be." And when they walked out of that church, Michelle said, "Oh God, I'm in. I'm going with it." So I like that that sentence. And actually, you've also preempted my next question, which is definitely going to Professor Villegas because it's kind of newsy. You know, my background is news. So we love a little bit of vavavoom, Prof. But I know you can take the heat. You're a nuclear man. You know, he mentioned medical student who can't finish 50%. So this morning, there's been a drama at your institution. The SRC there is up in arms. And they've appealed for civil society to come up with 21 million rand so that for this new academic year, so that over 8,000 students can be helped with their registration. Now, I know that Shirona Patel has said that is not true. There's no one who's facing financial exclusion. What are your thoughts, Prof?
No, I mean, I think, obviously, you know, a very good question. That came from the left field. What did they say in cricket?
But I'm not pressing.
No.
We're discussing.
Googly. No, I mean, this is among friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's the 8,000, I'm not going to go in quibbling about numbers.
Yes.
Are those that are potentially at risk, but are those students actually who have got sponsorships, but sponsors haven't come to the party? The NSFAS students who are also part of that basket as well. I mean, the numbers drilled down to about 2,000 or so that are actually in that high-risk category that we're looking into, right? And I think it's not that, in fact, the SRC and the university are working together. This fundraising concept operates on the basis of them spearheading it, the university providing the institutional infrastructure, and I've spoken to the SRC president 2 days ago, to provide the institutional infrastructure because obviously we have got expertise to handle that money. And I even spoke to one of the potential funders who said, the SRC approached me, and I said, of course, it's got the full endorsement of the university, right? It actually is, to me, it shows leadership. I mean, it's leadership training, that you don't have to always go back to the same repertoire of jumping up and down. And it becomes almost like quite boring now. And this was a group of young people that said, Vice Chancellor designate last year, here's our action plan. I said, okay, we'll work with you on this journey. They will fundraise. We do have counter of money we'll put to actually just seed money to say, you go for it, right? Then you're still negotiating how you match it. Two is that this will be managed by the CFO of the university and under the purview of the university foundation. That will be, should they raise more than is enough, then it will be part of now the seed for next year. Because our university covers a huge range of students, about 20% or 25% of our students are NSFAS students. Because if it's got a large number of what I would call middle class students, lower to upper middle class, and a proportion of students that are, of course, self-paying. So it's got a very eclectic mix of income streams. NSFAS are covered, and of course, those that can afford. There's a huge dilute range of those that are actually too rich to what? Too poor to afford, and too rich to qualify for NSFAS. And I think that is really the challenge, and it has been. And I think it's not that I'm going to question what the SSC is saying. Obviously, I'm not sure about that medical student. I mean, that matter has been resolved. It's just one of those kind of like process issues, really. But that's broadly the principle that you're operating under. So therefore, there's no, he said, she said. It's just basically, an initiative that has our full support, and we are right behind them, backing it. Very practical question. I mean,
you've held it like a pro. No, thank you very much. That's very informative. And, current affairs inform how people shape their ideas and so on. But it leads me, actually, this is very nice. It's kind of flowing. Yes, okay.
Still, I'm by no means underplaying the situation. We are facing a funding crisis in university. And they're not the only country, by the way. The United States, right? The next, best ends and run of the banks. Yeah. The student debt in America now sits at about $1.5 trillion and rising.
In fact, it's $50,000 per student.
And rising.
Which is what is actually the hot button issue inside the White House now.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, very true. The key thing, I remember I watched a film many years ago, which was called Shadowlands. I don't know if you've ever come across it. A very British, dark movie, lots of crying and sadness. But one of the famous lines there, we read to know that we're not alone. It's very beautiful. I never forgot it. When I walked out, I knew I was not alone in whatever I was confronting. So thank you very much. It's good to hear that from you. And it segues very nicely into my next question, which is the challenges and opportunities facing higher education in South Africa in broad terms. Who wants to go first? Okay, back to you.
It's like Turkey voting itself for Christmas lunch. The first, I mean, on the positive side, right? I think what we have in South Africa, fellow South Africans, is something that is fused with power. That is our projection of global power, of power in the global South. Yes, not all universities are the same because they vary in shape and size. And I think then one thing that I'm proud of in South Africa, despite all the things that we've mentioned in terms of the institutional baggages we carry, we have arguably the best higher educational system on the continent. In the global South, we have universities here with minimal funding that punch way above the weight. In response to COVID, for example, we have the capacity to do mRNA in this day and age. Our modeling, our analysis, understanding, and the way we've helped government in responding using science and facts, right, to respond to this, has something that actually has shown that we sit here with what is a national treasure. It is incumbent upon us as new leaders to not to destroy it, but to take it to the next level. Yeah. So I think the future for higher education is a bit, but we cannot afford to fail. This is the last well-functioning also entity. Our universities, some don't function well, but a significant number of them are well-run by people of integrity, very difficult individuals, but they believe that they've got their mission-critical assignment is to educate the next generation, create new knowledge, and as my brothers here have said, make this a better country. So that is point number one. The crisis really is one that you can focus on, right? It is largely about, financial support. If someone feels that the, poverty is violence, to use the word. So when someone feels that hungry, they are angry. And therefore they feel alienated because the other kid who's in the same class as them is thinking about the next skiing trip. That is exclusionary. Not by being excluded, but you're being included, but you feel excluded because the social fabric among impressionable young people is alienating for a child coming from Lusikisiki to a child coming from Sandton.
And in the digital age, now we see how the other half lives because they tell you on Instagram.
Yeah. And that to me is the biggest challenge. I mean, finance will always continue to be a challenge. There'll never be a land of plenty. But that will be, to me, the kind of inequalities, how they play themselves, they remain an existential problem. And I think I cannot find a solution to them. I mean, I was doing the road shows, what are virtual road shows nowadays, on Zoom. And I did tell colleagues that I don't have answers. Help me.
And that's fascinating. And what about you, Pramoris? What's your view of opportunities and challenges facing higher education?
Well, I'm new in this field of higher education, but geez, I started leading the business school in the midst of COVID. And I remember the Financial Mail asking me, what on hell, what has gone wrong with you? This COVID has changed the whole learning experience. The face-to-face learning experience is critical. When I was at, all of us, when we studying, you've got a teacher there lecturing you, and then you debate in the class, and you've got syndicates, and you've got assignments together, and then that rubs off, and you form networks that actually stand you in good stead going forward, even in your career. So for me, the challenge is how do we do education now in such a way that we have to use the technology, obviously, and the Zooms and the Teams, but also create an opportunity for this hybrid blended learning in order to effectively enhance the learning experience of our learners. So I think that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because our educators themselves were not educated in that environment. I mean, we now massively had to swift at the fast pace to get the lecturers to be able to lecture and teach through remote teaching, and students themselves struggling. And sometimes you sit in a class, the connectivity becomes a problem. And so I think that whole world, we need to navigate it. We need to get ourselves. I'm confident that we will adapt and we will move and very fast. And if we do so, I think it will open up even much more bigger opportunities for us.
Dr. Mohale?
So this relationship is incestuous. Because Wits is my alma mater.
Yeah, okay.
That's where I studied MBBCH.
Yeah.
Hillbrow, we were the first group to go up to the hill in Padtown. Yeah. 2, I serve on his foundation for the last 5 years. So when he says Wits Foundation, he looks at me. That's my job. But the real challenge is the students that you see at Wits who are studying and passing, and nobody knows where they stay. Because they sleep in the library, and they come up in the morning and they wash the whole body from the basin. They are so poor that other students know. So in the library, they've put a brown box at the corner. Those that have discreetly buy a sandwich and deposit it in those boxes. And they come out at night to go and get their supper. The challenge is that Stats SA says in South Africa today, in this country, in this context, when so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail, only 14.3% of households have direct access to the internet. So it leaves the other 85% outside. So when you say to employees, go and work from home, that's where you are sending them to. Zero connectivity. It's the fact that even when they are at home and we've given them a laptop and a smartphone, a majority of them, to get home, they have to get into a taxi that transports 13.5 million people a day, and yet they're not subsidized. It's unsafe. It's inaccessible. And it's the shortest way of making sure that both the laptop and the smartphone gets confiscated. The challenge is that even when they make it at home, and now they've got their laptops and they're on Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and they are working. Since the 1st of January 2008, that's 13 years ago, we've had rolling blackouts of electricity. So each time ESCOM goes to level 2, it wipes off an entire percentage onto the national GDP. So at 5% of GDP, that's 21% of revenue. So we can see that our problem is going to be finance. And the problem is self-made, self-harm, self-inflicted. Because you can't call yourself a country and a leadership, and yet in 13 years you are unable to solve the rolling blackouts. And you have spent more money than anybody else in the world. We are the 4th in the world to build the biggest coal-fired power station, not one, but we decided to do 3 concurrently, simultaneously, and in parallel. Medupi was the first, Kusile was the second, and then we did Ingula, which is hydroelectric. On the other side, we financed Kahora Basa with the Mozambicans to give us hydroelectric power. We financed Inga 1, Inga 2, but Inga 3, the mighty Inga, we underwriting 65% of that. The plan was good, but of the 1.4 billion people that are in absolute darkness, 673 million of them are found in Africa. Out of the 1.3 billion, 55 countries that speak 2,000 languages. So you can see that unless we call ourselves leaders, we should be able to say, this is where we are now. This is where we want to be tomorrow. It should not take us 10 years to solve the problems that we have. Because our problem with electricity generation in this country, it's not money. In fact, we have wasted much more. So Medupi started at 30 billion, it's about 55 billion. Kusile exactly the same thing. In fact, even when you go back to the new product pipeline, budgeted at 7.2 billion, delivered at 19.7 billion. We are unable to deliver mega projects on time, in full, and on budget.
Behind schedule.
7 years.
Badly designed, badly built. That's what the minister says.
So how do you call yourself a leader? How can the rest of the world have confidence in you when you can't even fix your own backyard? Lastly, I think the challenge is that we're not learning from the best in the world. Harvard University is the richest university in the world today. The results show, because they've got the biggest endowment, 80 billion US dollars. Endowment says you are giving money, you're not touching the capital, you're just using the interest, followed by Stanford at 40 billion. And the reason why they're amongst the top 5 in the world, you look at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, you look at Instituto de Empresa in Madrid, Europe's #1 business school. They all have one thing in common. They've moved away from having PhD academics as heads of business schools. I'm being very specific. They're getting business people to be heads of business because you are designing a curriculum for who? For business. These are the people who say, this is how we want you to grow our own timber. So until and unless VETS has a sizable endowment and they live on just the interest, at the moment, everything about South Africa, we're eating the seeds. What are we going to use to plant for tomorrow? So the Stone Age did not end because man ran out of stone. The Stone Age ended because man found a better, more effective and efficient way of doing things. The carbon footprint will not be less because we have depleted all the coal from the ground. Yeah. It will end because we have found better ways of providing energy. In integrated energy, we now call it mobility. This is the only continent in the world where the sun shines 328 days a year. And yet the World Authority on Solar Energy is Germany, that has no more than 90 days. The wind is free. And we have towns that are called windy cities. 3 of the mightiest rivers in the world, including the mighty Zambezi, is found here. Enough to generate hydroelectric power for all 1.3 billion of us, and the access to send to Europe. Pummeling at the Vic Falls at 53,000 tons of water per second. But we're not harnessing that force, that energy, that impetus. So poverty and riches are both an outcome of our ability to think.
Guys, where's the applause? This is incredible, because I'm now feeling in a very Kabbalistic way that somehow, although I'm of a lesser mind, we are connected, because all the discussions are coming to exactly where I want to go next. So you were talking about Madrid and business schools and Harvard, and we touched, for obvious reasons, on VETs. But I just wanted you, not to put you in a predicament about talking about other academic institutions, but I just want you to think broadly about, we spoke about finance and so on. What do you think needs to be done in terms of institutions? So we spoke about students, ideas, but what can the institutions do, particularly in South Africa, to try and leverage on that great potential that we have? Bob Vilagasa.
First, just before I start, I've sat in many panels. I don't know Ndate Mohale, like he's got like statistics rolling out of his ears, and I do my like Wikipedia checks, and I can't keep up. His ability to handle numbers, I've never sat with any panelist in my life. Even I've sat with some of the smartest physicists, but none of them can roll statistics such high level of precision and speed, like Ndate Mohale. And I've got to. And I'm not a generous man. I don't get.
In fact, I might just add, because we can, we're very open. We say in public what we say in private. What did I say when I saw you this afternoon? I spoke to him about his ability of just rolling out the stats and methodically explaining chapter and verse without really reading any document. It's very impressive.
Indeed, what it speaks about, Bamkos, is about the fact that we are not short of leadership and thinkers in this country. I mean, just now let's go to the to the question. I think I'll not deliberate much on, but I think it's about actually what you think are the challenges of higher education, right? If I heard you correctly, the challenges of higher education are actually sustainability, and I'm not using it in a glib way, because we've had in the past to import professors from America, from all over the world, who actually were willing to relocate here through what was basically a special program called the South African Research Chair Initiative, to actually have enough students who will meet the demands of the square kilometer array. An incredibly beautiful strategic intervention. Yes, I'm a physicist, I might have a bit of a bias, but I think it is something that is actually as far-sighted of our government. And now they are beginning to do that. At the same time, though, we are not getting the right, enough of a pipeline of talent in the country when we have only, I'm going to not say that, 100,000 of the million kids who enter school, only 100,000 pass matric. Only at VETS, only basically 5,000 enter the university out of a pool of about 70,000 that apply. So there's a lot of culling even upstream. What happens to that? That basically means that the higher educational system, which is the main focus in the media because it's the apex, is the tip of the iceberg. If you look beyond even the post-school secondary education system, we have lost the other 900,000 children that didn't finish their matric. Where are they? And I think that is a question that we've never asked in this country. And that is a challenge we are facing. And I think that is something to me that we need to drill deeper and understand. So our problems are not with the apex. It is, if you drill deeper, we need to think about how we get those beyond even the TVET system. So South Africa sometimes seems to be able to master the art of wastage. And you can turn it around. I mean, there are many potential areas you can work around. I'm not going to give you a doom and gloom. But I think that the challenge is, of course, money, investment. You mentioned institutional culture and long-term sustainability. And I think the solutions have already been presented. That at the business school, if you take that pioneering act that I'm proud of that you did, to actually say that this is the way the future is heading towards, is that. And of course, we've spoken about the digital disruptions. They will actually change it. And the fact that the gap is widening between us and the global north, right? With the East rising. Do you know that the only country in the continent that is grappling with the challenges, and that saddens me because I go to this continent, across the continent quite a lot, is us. You know, what actually is much scarier is, despite all this hand wringing we're facing, is that I went to Ghana, I went to East Africa. I mean, their state of higher education is even a more parlous state. They make turf look like Harvard. And I'm not saying this to be, it really is, but the determination of those students is quite incredible. So I think also as well, we need as South Africans, even our students, to have a reality check as well. That you do sit in a position of, to use the Einsteinian relativity, relative privilege in the entire higher educational sector within the continent itself, our mother continent.
This is the Bafana syndrome, where everybody has got kit to play, they've got manicured lawns, and they get beaten by like Pongoland.
and then the question is therefore,
the
question therefore is why our best students in kind of what I would call, for the want of a better word, the hard sciences, not South African, drawn from those countries of extreme impoverishment.
You mentioned the SKA, the Square Kilometre Array telescope. It's quite an amazing project. I've been to Carnarvon a few times. And incidentally, tonight, being a newsman, if you're interested in the news, tonight the Mars rover called Perseverance is landing on Mars at about 20:55 GMT, more or less. So don't quote me. But think about it. It's quite inspirational, that kind of thing. Those are the things that move me. These people are the same as us. They have nose like us. They get flu like us, and they still manage to go to other continents. Why can't we do it? So the SKA is very, very impressive. Opening up for questions. I think we're coming up to that time now. Can I just ask? Are you ready for questions now, or do you want me to ask a question? What's your feel? Okay. So, what's up? Yes.
Dr. Maurice wants to add.
Yes, please.
What needs to be done about these institutions?
Yes.
Well, I've spent my life in the corporate world, and I've seen the production of students coming out of our academic institutions, and there's been a mismatch. We had to, in the corporate world, start to retrain the student, have bridging programs, and basically make them to fit the world of work. And what I realize, what we need to do, that is why, one of the reasons why I've joined the academic world, is to really help work. And it is changing very fast. And it is changing very quickly. So it is very important that the institutions start to really understand the needs of the industry, understand the dynamism that is taking place, understanding the culture that is taking place. The culture. And I'm saying we must run the business school like a business, not like an NGO, as a business, so that what we produce here is people that actually will be fit very well and hit the ground running. And most of our students here, they're unprepared. And therefore, for me, the institution, we need to be very close to the world of work. As academic institution, we must be so intertwined that we should be able to be seamless, so that our kids can go out of our academic institution and hit the ground running.
allow you to elaborate.
Yeah.
Because Tsepo Mokhoto has just asked a question. How are business schools and institutions of higher learning transforming themselves to ensure they produce graduates that can participate and seize the opportunities of the new normal? That's exactly what you're saying.
That's the point. That's the point. It's a very valid question, very good question. We need to spend inordinate amount of time us spend that time, so we're bringing that value to the business school to basically question. For instance, right now I'm asking the entire school to review all our courses, review the MBA program. Is it still as relevant as it was before, when it was not 3IR or 2 the second revolution? We were producing students that will probably will make good in a third revolution, but now we're in a 4R. So it's very important. So it starts with upskilling, relearning, and of our own, exposing them, running the workshops for them, and making sure that they're closer to the institution. It means we must bring business people. I'm planning a program of having a lot of the bonangs of this world coming to our business schools to come and teach and lecture or part-time and share this. And this kind of symbiotic relationship needs to be strengthened, because without that interface, engagement all the time, we will miss the boat. We'll produce students that are completely not fit for purpose.
A very interesting one from Mudise Sitwaba. He says, I understand we're on higher education, but can we address also the issue of vocational education? I believe this will also equip the youth to be multi-skilled. The panel may elaborate. Elaborate.
So this is the greatest tragedy. And I'm adding on Ubabu Zebulon, what he said about some of the challenges that are facing us. So we spend 50 billion rands on TVET colleges with a completion rate of 3%. And yet, we refuse to learn from countries like Germany. So Germany makes the most aspirational cars in the world. Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche. But the education system is actually vocational. A majority of their citizens don't even go up to what we used to call matric, now grade 12. They catch you at standard 8. And they say, let's teach you to be the best car mechanic in the world. And look at the cars that they are producing. So in this country, 1996, I was the MD of the world's biggest and oldest elevator company. At our own cost, we used to train lift mechanics. 4 years. They write a government ticket. We used to pay them a stipend of 3,500 a month. They come with a certificate on Tuesday. On Friday, their salary goes up to 10%. Those are the people that now live in houses in Don Park and Leondale called blue-collar workers. So we find, and paid for by private companies. We come in under Dula Omar, I think at that time, and then we come with outcome-based education, which works best in developed countries, because sometimes we forget fit for purpose. And we close teachers' training colleges, nurses' colleges, and these vocational schools, Ambach. Yeah. And the first year after we have amalgamated all of this, there's a stampede at UJ. A mother who had come with her daughter gets killed because we have removed the other options, channeled them to just one. Here's the last one, funneled them just one. Here's the last comment. You know, the Afrikaners created their own institutions. Honors de Poort, University of Pretoria, Rand Afrikaanse Universiteit, and Stellenbosch. 99.8% of all their MPs came from Stellenbosch. Not by accident, by design. We decided to amalgamate this. But what they did was, even those institutions that provide medicine, MBBCH, some call it MBCHB, they translated technical medical terms, anterior superior iliac spine, into Afrikaans and taught them medicine in Afrikaans. When they qualified, to increase the level of hope, they put them in real hospitals to treat real patients. When you get it wrong, somebody dies a real death. Today, 27 years into democracy, the University of Fort Hare and Turfloop are still the poorest. The formerly white universities are the ones that are still getting most of the funding. Even the ones that has produced 5 African presidents neglected, you see by the grass just in the pavement when you approach it. So I think we have not succeeded in shaping these institutions of higher learning into our own image. The book of Revelation says, where there is no vision, the people perish. We lack that strategic vision.
Can I just add on this, a personal family story? And it was a disaster to close down those Ambach trade schools. You know, and I'm telling this story all the time. My brother who comes after me, his name is Sipho Khadebe. Because I was more academic, so I went to pass my matric, I went to university. So they forced him also to say, hey, follow your brother, you must also go to university, you must pass your matric. And this young man was struggling and having difficult. In fact, he became very rebellious. And what I told him, so he redirected that entire energy to become a real soldier, and we thought he's a lost cause. And there was, then I call him a wise uncle who said, no, let's not take him to university. He took him to score medals. And he was taught fitter and turner, which is a trade there. And he went to Modderfontein to qualify there. And he was a fitter and turner for about 15 to 20 years at that time. And I challenged him, I said, man, you're coming from a stock of business people. Now you've got enough experience to start your own business. Right now, he's got his own factory, he's got his own company, he's employing people, he's living a good life, and he's making a success of his life. Much more than he would ever even done if he had finished his degree. He's actually been employing people with degrees. That is what we're talking about. That was a cardinal educational error that we made. And we closed. You remember the nurses' colleges that we used to be there that gave people an opportunity to learn. I think somehow, somewhere we need to wake up and do something about that.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Judy Dlamini. I assume it's Dr. Judy Dlamini, but and listen to the question. You'll realize. So it says GBF has gone up. This is gender-based violence. Mental well-being is really important. Professor Mohale. That's the message.
So, because Mrs. Judy is our boss at VETS, and she comes to the VETS Foundation meetings and sits there the whole day, by the way. But also my business partner, because when we started Drake and Skull Integrated Facilities Management, and we got the first public-private partnership under healthcare at Nkosi Albeluthuli Central Hospital, we gave her a first contract to form Bekani, and I worked with her, an accomplished business person, an academic of note, an author of a best-selling book, Equal, and I attended the launch, and we are blessed to have her. But here's my response to her question, but at a high level, because gender-based violence and mental health, we have touched a little bit on it, and I think she's agreeing with us. I think as Africans, if we forget to understand why we are where we are today, we will never be able to come out of this morass. The English gave South Africa to the Afrikaners, not to the black elites, primarily for 3 reasons. Even though the black elites were more educated than the Afrikaners, and indeed, they were better farmers. One was they need to continue to give us a crucible of cheap labor for our mines. Number two was the output of these mines, gold, but in particular, the diamonds must be sold to us as Britain. Three, not South Africa, but London will determine the price. Hence, the London Sales Organization. That's why when the Afrikaners got into power, the first thing that they did was to create honest report, to learn about farming and veterinary science. And after the University of Pretoria, the rest is history. Today, we have not changed that math as the people who are in political office, but not in economic office. Poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face. And if you are born in Alexander, the chances are you are already condemned to be in an informal settlement. You're born white and in Bryanston, the chances are you'll be a blue-collar worker and you are going to live quite a comfortable life. Today, I pay more per hour to my plumber than to the cardiothoracic surgeon. Thank you, sir.
No, that's very true. In fact, a friend of mine in the UK said exactly the same thing. His neighbor is an accountant, and he said his neighbor had a boiler problem, and a plumber came. And when they gave him the invoice, he realized the plumber is earning more than he does. And he's...
Sorry,
yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Yeah.
I wanted to add on what the Chancellor asked the question is, last year a student was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, apologies, in Islalini, somewhere in the Eastern Cape, during lockdown, right? I think then maybe she had, of course, moved on and became a student, a first year BSc or second year BSc student in Johannesburg, left the boy behind. Men getting left behind become angry. And the guy maybe thought, he's stabbed to death. Right? I mean, that was... And as the SRC president then, the young man, said, I'm calling you brothers. We did it. Right? Until we need to take ownership. Leadership is about taking ownership. Like almost a typical Roman general folding a sword, metaphorically, and say, we own this. We need this. If you don't own it as men, then you're not going to solve it. It is us who are perpetrators. And I think that's what this young man said. So I think at some stage, an element of ownership, changing the res culture, adversities, from the old macho culture of men's res, into a culture of what it is to educate a 21st century man.
That is very, very important. And thank you very much, Dr. Lamini, for raising GBV, because it's a very important, including femicide, of course, it's a very important part of leadership and what we are discussing here. Teddy Ramabulana, how do we ensure that former black universities upscale to UCT or VETS level without leaving them behind as the caterer or for working class in particular? I think we've dealt with that. So if he's been following, thank you, Teddy. You got the answer before the question. And then Mbulelo Meiwa, question to Ntate Mohale. Why, with your rich experience in business management, you did not choose to support our state-owned business by making yourself available for at least 5 years to be CEO of an SOE? Bafuna tenderisha that.
So the truth be told, so first of all, when we have strategic conversations with people that we mentor, we ask 5 questions that they must answer. It's not about right or wrong, it's the lens through which you look at life. We say, what's your purpose? Where do you want to play? How do you play to win? What skills do you need? And who's going to help you? So I've chosen to be a business person, not a politician, not a consultant, not to run my own B entity, but to touch people in corporate. So I'm a corporate entity. It's a choice that I've made. However, remember I became MD of the world's biggest and oldest elevator company in 1996, Otis Elevators. At that time, It was part of United Technologies Corporations out of Hartford, Connecticut. Otis made lifts, Carrier made air conditioners, Sikorsky, they made helicopters. We sold one, the Black Hawk, to Charles Taylor. We had Hamilton Sandstrand, they made environmental products, toilets for the space shuttle, a cabin for Apollo 13, etc. Pratt & Whitney, they made jet engines, PW300, PW800s, especially on the Boeing 747s. And at that time, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Jeff Harden, had hunted me from Otis to go and become the first South African Executive Vice President at SAA, an 8-year-old award-winning African airline. And I went there to become an Executive Vice President and looking after 3 portfolios: revenue management, global sales, and strategic alliances. And not only that, I served on the board of AXA, and I was on the board of South African Express Airways. So I've paid a little bit of my rent. But what you realize very quickly because of this cadre deployment is that instead of picking the best amongst us, who can use the more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies to push this country forward in time and in space, no, we give it to people who must go and be CEOs there, more often than not, who don't even know the difference between income and cash, because they've agreed that 5% of their salary will go to the organization. So we are killing ourselves because we are really not moving forward. Here's my last thought. Had we put women and black people in the more than 740 SOEs in the 27 years that we've been in charge, and we make provision for 20% of them failing just for a period of 5 years, because that's what the question is saying. Today we'll be sitting with 3,000 black and women managers with a demonstrable track record. This ANC-led government has killed more black professionals and more black small businesses than the whole of apartheid put together. And you can do the math. In one day at ESCOM, there's 20 black CEOs that on average have been there each 27 years. 4 of them were there only for 6 months, including Tsidiso Matona. After 6 months, 4 of them were fired because they refused to sign the optimum coal contract to the Guptas. Each one of them has spent in corporate 20 years. So the way state capture works, it's really just on those 4 things. 1, it's creating a shadow state. 2, it's repurposing SOEs and SOCs. Number 3, getting rid of the good guys and replacing them with the bad guys. Their only claim to fame is that they must aid and abet state capture. In fact, we had a name for them. We called them clever blacks. And then lastly, it's now you must go to the hose pipe, drink from the fountain, and capture national treasure, because we run the biggest asset manager in the continent, the PIC, on behalf of the GEPF, sitting on 2 trillion asset under management. So it is quite attractive to go. So I think the day our politicians wake up and say, let's put our best foot forward, I tell you, Africa is not a poor continent, just poorly governed. Over to you, sir.
I've got a comment here from Tumi Sikete, or Sikete. How are you ensuring all of this wealth of wisdom and knowledge you have shared with us is captured and converted into literature for the benefit of future generations across the continent? Now, Tumi, you are very ambitious. We've just been sitting here for nearly 2 hours. You want us to write a book? But it's special. Yes, go ahead.
First of all, we're capturing it. Right now on video. That's the reason why we didn't want to make it a Zoom or a Teams meeting, because then you don't have the replay value. So as ULP, we've deliberately have these kind of sessions like this. Even during the COVID, that's why you don't have. If it was pre-COVID, this place would be packed with over maybe 200 people sitting around this. So we've captured it, and we're deliberate about that. And there is secondly, we've launched a program last week which is called ULP Authors Forum. which is encouraging the whole culture of writing. If you think about it, I mean, more than 1,000 years ago, modern civilization was here. But because we had no culture of writing, we had oral culture, we lost that whole civilization. I mean, Egypt is in Africa, I mean, if you think about it. And so what we're talking about is now have this culture of writing. So we'll also be developing classes of authors. Bonang will be inviting him to get a young man called Confidence. He is actually passionate interviewing writers. So we will be documenting this. We're planning to have a series of documenting all the material that we have with huge amount of data. I mean, ULP has been 10 years now. Theo, how many CEOs have been here? 86 CEOs we've got captured, and it's one book after the other that is going to come out of here. So we are capturing it, that's for sure.
And I have a few comments, if I may.
Yeah.
Mary Vilagazi.
Who's that?
Tenderpreneurship.
It's called a Vilagazi.
Yeah. But listen to the comment. Listen to the comments. It's quite interesting. Inspired by the discussions this evening, brownie points. Thank you for hosting. I look forward to a similar session with women from the East. Is there something special in Katlehong, water or air, by the way? And then I've got Nozizwe Dinga. Do you think the quality of our education system can ever produce such quality leadership to take our country forward? Secondly, are we producing graduates or entrepreneurs who will think out of the box? That was sort of mentioned. Thank you very much, Nozizwe. Very much futuristic there. You predicted that one. And then Dr. Dlamini comes back, says, yes, Vilagazi, well articulated. Men's accountability and deliberate change of culture is part of the solution to eradicate GBVF. And then I've got here, so this is good. We've got a lot of people taking part now online. Ray Vilagazi, proud of you guys. Nelson Lipoko, Pepos, well said, Morris. Mudise Setwaba, we read one from him. K1, rise up. Black child, wise up. We have Musa Shangase, a candle loses nothing to give light to another. Amazing. If you continue on that path, we're going to change the world. So those are the comments. They were not necessarily questions. But do you have any thoughts on any of those? Before I ask you to make your closing comments.
I should also comment on the statement by Mary Vilagazi.
I will promise Mary that we will definitely,
yes,
through ULP, I'll charge the CEO to find women from the East or from the West who grew up in the township and have a situation, a session like this. We will definitely do.
I want to say to Mary, you are so right. You know, we are feminists here. So I know nowadays they talk about Instagram, Twitter, optics are everything. When you see males sitting like this in the 21st century, it doesn't really look right. Yeah. But it's because we have a bigger plan. Yeah. This is the beginning. Yeah. We end with the women. So it's not where you start, Mary. Okay, yeah.
Let me add on what Dr. Judy Dlamini has said. You know, many people are worried that their daughters are going to be victims of gender-based violence and femicide. But very few are really concerned about the fact that their sons are the ones that are doing the harming. Therefore, to add on what Brazeblon has said, we need to find a way of raising men and liberate them to take them out of the man cave and to be comfortable that there's a new way of masculinity that is not toxic, that is not misogynistic, that you don't find your joy, purpose, and meaning by thinking that being head of the family is actually giving people instructions, when actually what it means is to serve. The same way that Christ says, I'm the head of the church, to serve.
Thank you very much. Did I read Soraya Thomas? Many leaders started their leadership journey at a child labor age and not higher education facility. They're just reminding you. How do we take this to secondary and primary school level? We need to ingrain this way of thinking. You've already touched on it when we're talking about vocational training and so on. So thank you very much, Soraya. 10 points for being on the button. So we've come to the end of our discussion, and I want to offer you a bit of time to give us your closing thoughts. I didn't want to say remarks. It sounds like I'm at a wedding yaselokishini. Sicela ubaba omkhulu azovala ngama-closing remarks. We are at ULP here. So could you be generous enough to give us over what you've given us tonight, your closing thoughts about where we need to go with leadership in South Africa and indeed on the continent, because we're inherently African, so we're not an island. Can I start with you, Babzeb?
I've started on an optimistic note. I think this has been a very deep conversation. Frankly, this is a World Economic level, World Economic WEF forum. I mean, I'm sure that not even Professor Schwab can do your job. First, I mean, congratulations. I think you really have provoked us, skewered us, roasted us, and with a devilish smile, you know. But thank you so much, Babungus. And I mean, to be with this panel to me has been so humbling. People like, well, my elders actually, whom I hold in extremely high regard, and the remarks that come from some of the seniors of society here. To close is, I'll not summarize because I think a lot has been said, but I'm going to leave with this parting shot that it's about the ripples of hope. You know, we are daunted by all that surrounds us, but it just takes like a candle. Each and every ripple will aggregate into the waves that will wash away all this that surrounds us. Steve Biko said that as a young 27-year-old, 28-year-old man, I can see beyond the horizon, right, a shimmering prize that will bestow upon the world, that of the African face of humanity, right? My view is, despite all these vicissitudes we're going through, right, they will shape and mold us. Scandinavians came from the jungles as marauding Vikings and rapists and became the most progressive men of the 21st century, right? What I'm saying is, I do see a future as a nuclear physicist so bright, it's so brighter than 1,000 atomic bombs smashing together, and it'll come from the east.
I'm sure Brother Jeff is very proud of you.
Probably listening, yeah. Your principal in Fumana. Jeff, thank you.
Can I just say, to the nuclear physicists, 10 points for poetry, please. That was beautiful. Ndati Muhala.
So it's not by accident that we chose to be in education, because when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gains access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. Even though we are in academia, we want to teach our colleagues, friends, and significant relationships to start their own businesses and employ our own children Because I think it's madness that we continue to make babies and send them to a different neighborhood to go on their knees and ask somebody else for a job. Lastly, for me, it has been truly fantastic to be in the presence of dignified greatness from the black pool of excellence. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, Bob Khater.
Also, thank you. This is a great session we've had. Thank you for the wise men from the East. Thank you, Milton, for doing such a great job in facilitating this job. I just want to speak. Is the camera there? I want to speak to a young man or a young girl in Katlehong, in Soweto, in Tembisa, and you're sitting there. The only dream is that you will live and die in that township, and your vision is so limited, and you think your whole sky is already blocked, and you're from a poor family. Maybe you came up from a very dysfunctional family. Maybe you came up from in a situation where there is no education. There's nobody in your family who's ever passed matric. I want to tell you something, that you are the one who's going to start breaking through the cycle of poverty out of your family. You have a potential to make that giant leap out of your own family. We need you. This whole world is waiting for you. And please, your talents will outstrip any township life that you have. And never limit yourself. Rise up. The reason we're here just to inspire you, to cheer you, to encourage you, to equip you, to make sure that you become the best that you can be. And the whole world is waiting for you. Thank you very much.
Well, that brings us, yes. Well, that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you so much for taking my questions. I have my own little close. You know, when we started, I quoted Oscar Wilde, who I followed quite enthusiastically as a young man in Orlando Township. And when you quoted Steve Biko, you reminded me. Oscar Wilde says, a dreamer is one who can only find his way by moonlight. His punishment is that he sees the dawn before the rest of the world. And that's on my father's grave.
Thank you, Bro Milton. On your grave, I will write the one that interviewed Duduzane Zuma. But this is the first time in more than 11 years that I speak after Baba Khatev, and the reason after him. But let me thank the panelists today. Let me thank you, Baba Khatev, as well, and Mam Khatev, and for the investment that you have made into ULP and building this institution. You know, every time we emailed you, and I think within 5 minutes you told your PA. We've called you so many times since 2014. You've been here, I think, 5 times now, and we really appreciate your support. Mr. Vilagazi, this is the start of a new journey for you with us at ULP, and I appreciate it. And we thank you for joining us today, and we wish you all the best as you lead one of the biggest institution on the continent, and we think you'll do great. It's funny that in 27, we're in a room with you and you were signing a bit of a contribution from Cheetah. And at the time you were a deputy VC, and we could have never told that you're going to be a VC. And look at you today, and look at Baba Khatev today, you know. And Tatem Halu was right on that money that the thinks I likes money, but you told them today, and you're. From Milton, my friend, what can I say? My brother, my mentor, my sounding board. You know, I asked him on Sunday to do this, and within 5 minutes he came back and he said, "Whatever you want me to do, my brother, I'll be there." And he even cut his hair. He looked like you, Professor Vidaraz, yesterday, and look at how handsome he is. Follow our YouTube page. It seems like we want to be using it more than our Facebook page going forward. Can you please also go to ulpgovernance.co.za to see some of the programs we're doing there. If you can also go to mmi-sa.com, you'll see a 9-month program that we have there, and I think it will help you. And I think the last thing is that next month we continue with our Authors Forum. We've got Mr. Mteto Nyati, and he will be the one at our first live event next month, and then we'll announce the next speaker in the next few weeks. Thank you. Good night, good evening, and thank you again for joining ULP. Good evening, and thank you again for joining ULP. Be well. Bye-bye.